approval. Okay. One second, I'm having a little difficulty getting it to advance. There we go. So, let's know how to fill it out is what we're going to talk about today. When to fill it out, where and what to send, and then the famous question, then what? So on that screen, you see the prior approval handbook that's for chapters. And hopefully, those that have been on the call have had a chance to use this in the past, or for those of you that are new to this or need a refresher, that is the official handbook that we're going to reference today. And I'll have Abigail put it in an attachment after the fact, after the call, so that you can have it in an attachment. But there also is a link that I will show you later on in the presentation of how to get to this handbook. So the purpose of the CBDM prior approval program is to recognize any continuing education providers that meet our standards and guidelines to be able to present a program to grant continuing education credit. And the CBDM, that's the Certifying Board for Dietary Managers, they are in charge of the continuing education process for us. They're our governing body for that. So there's a lot on this slide, but basically it talks about the mission of the certifying board, and those are members that are from the dietitian community, from the CDM communities. They're our peers. Many of us have sat on that board, and it is the one that reviews our continuing education and does our audit. So when we talk about granting prior approval, it's kind of like the question, what's the big deal? Why do I want to get prior approval? The reason we do that is chapters. The biggest push for us is to provide good quality education to our members that we can use to continue our education and career path by gaining those 45 continuing ed credits. So the benefit of having it vetted, or having our programs or our chapters fall and spring, or however many chapter meetings you have a year, is that our members know when they come to these meetings that we've already chosen good, solid topics that they will be able to take back to their facilities or their healthcare or their work environments to continue to share with their staff and be part of learning and continued learning. So by having that prior approval seal, that tells them that everything has passed all the recommendations and they can market your program as a valid continuing ed program. So we talk about the recognition of a high quality, it's rich in content. We talk a lot about lifelong learning objectives. That's the way we grow as certified dietary managers, and keeping on top of the industry standards. So right now, regulations is a moving target through CMS. We have a push for sanitation with the 9 continuing education credits we need for our sanitation. So being able to stay on top of the industry standards. And then there's always that marketing opportunity. A lot of us have large chapters, and it's always exciting to be able to see as many of our members come, gather with us and network, and have that opportunity to learn together with us. And by having a prior approval course, we can market that. And then the big thing with the ease of reporting and submitting that to you, once we have a prior approval, we can go in, when we go in, put in our continuing eds in the computer, the program will pop up based off of the prior approval number that we put in, making it easier for us to account electronically for those hours for that program. So here we go into the general application. And when I first got a hold of the manual and I was looking at it, I kind of chuckled to myself when I read this first statement that said, to apply for prior approval, these things are what we would like to see, and number 1 is listed as read the entire prior approval handbook. Isn't that a marvelous concept? It's just a wonderful idea, and it's really necessary to be able to understand the process as a whole. And that is why we have the handbook that includes the application and all the steps that we need to follow. So I would highly suggest that in your chapters, you talk about this at your board meetings. You talk about setting the dates for these meetings. You talk about finding speakers for these meetings. I think it's just as important that you should have a handbook at your next board meeting, especially if you're looking towards the spring of 2018 to plan meetings, so that you have the handbook open and you can show and share all the steps that are required. The same way if you have an education committee, share with the committee what the process is. Share the handbook. It's a wealth of information, it's well written, and it will ease the burden of getting the paperwork correct the first time that you send in for the prior approval, so that the process will flow as it should. So when we talk about what we want for our education, the big push is that our programs best pertain to nutrition and medical nutrition therapy, food service personnel and communications, the sanitation and the food safety, business operations, and leadership healthcare as they relate to food service. So once again, by going through and looking at this manual, it's going to guide you into what is a program that will qualify for continuing education and will fit the needs of all our members. So here are some examples and some chapter tips. The big thing here is the request for prior approval should be submitted 8 weeks before the event takes place. And only the program coordinator can request prior approval for a group. And now, sitting on the other side, you know, I've gone from the pew and I'm now sitting in the pulpit. I used to think, 8 weeks. I'd do my darndest to get it turned into the Iowa chapter for 8 weeks. It sometimes didn't work out that way. Sometimes I'd waiting on a speaker. But I can tell you now that it is important to give ample time, because A, you have a lot of paperwork you have to gather. B, you want it to be marketed and put on the ANFP website so people can see when to come. And C, they like to have the agenda posted with the continuing education credits listed, so that if they need to give it to their administrators or share in their facilities, or maybe I'm coming up to the end of my certification period and I need a couple more sanitation, then I can see and plan ahead. If I know that my chapter is going to offer certain CEs, and I can get the process rolling on my end so that I'm successful in being able to attend. So getting it in 8 weeks before is a big help, and it will ease the process and make all those other pieces of the puzzle come together so you can have a truly successful meeting. Now we talk about what activities are ineligible, and this is important, especially when we're a chapter and we're trying to put together an agenda and trying to get a time frame in, we're trying to get our breaks in, we're trying to get our chapter business meetings in, we're trying to get any award ceremonies, all those kind of things we have to take a look at to put on the agenda, but not all of them are going to be worthy of a continuing education. So here's a list in the manual that tells very nicely what things are ineligible. And I think one of the big things is when we talk about, you know, if we're doing a business meeting, can it count? No, it can't. A vendor equipment training, the vendor's going to come in and give an example of how to use the combi oven, it's not going to count. So these are things that we need to pay attention to. Meals without speakers. If it's just a straight meal time, it's not going to count. But say you have an hour and you want a half an hour for a speaker to come in and speak during the meal, then you will spell it out on your application that it's 12 to 1 is a meal, but 12:30 to 1 will be a speaker on dysphagia or something like that. So it pertains to what is worthy of a CE, and we're listing it on the agenda as a speaker during the mealtime. And we have that spelled out on the agenda when we go and apply for our continuing education credit. Here's another little tidbit that I found interesting, calculating the number of hours. So basically what it's saying, that a person needs to have a minimum of 30 minutes of attendance or participation required for their CE credit. So 1 CE hour is equivalent to 60 minutes of attendance. And then a minimum of 30 minutes of attendance participation is required to get the CE credit. And after 30 minutes, your CEs are accrued in 15-minute increments. So that's also helpful to know when you're calculating that. And then this is something I think we always need to make front and center on anything when we're communicating to our chapters, is what is required. So if on your agenda you list that you're having so many general continuing education credits, sanitation, food show, that is great. You can also, I've seen chapters that have listed, we're offering, say, 3 sanitation credits towards your 9 hours in your 3-year cert period. So you can list it out that way so that the members know, 12 general education towards your 45 hours in your 3-year cert period. Now, one of the things I think that we don't always realize and recognize is that we have a maximum of 5 continuing education credit hours every 3 years for food shows. So this is where you're doing a chapter and you're planning a meeting, you might take that into consideration. There's only 5 hours in 3 years. So if you're going to get speakers and you're going to have a food show at the same time, great, but don't always bank on maybe 5 food show hours and 1 general education. Just make sure that you remind your chapters that, food show hours are 5 CEs in your 3-year cert period. And the same thing when you're going in the vendor community, try to take a look. It's great to go to food shows, but if they have any classes during the food show, or you yourself, if you have a 3-hour food show and one of the vendors wants to do a sanitation in-service in the middle of the food show hall, then you can capture a sanitation credit during those hours that are set aside for that food show. So kind of be creative and take a look at what's the big picture here. We're trying to get our chapter and our members to 45 hours in the 3 years. We're looking for the 9 sanitation, and we're maxing out at the 5 food shows. Okay, so when we talk about continuing competencies and we're looking at evaluating our processes, when you send all your information into ANFP, it gets vetted and we look at it and we evaluate in regards to the things that we ask you to send us. And we're taking a look at where do they lie on the continuing competencies. We have set competency levels through the CBDM board. There's competency level 1, 2, and 3. And the next slide we'll talk a little bit more in specifics. But when we take a look and we evaluate the proposed program for the content, we're taking a look at what's the title, what's the instructor qualifications, how's the agenda look, do we have course overviews. We ask for the target audience. We ask for a ballpark about how many attendees are you expecting, and then what's your total number of CEs requested. And then we take a look at them and we try to, behind the scenes at ANFP, we take a look at where we feel your program lands in the competency level. And it might be in different competencies. If it's a 2-day affair, we might have various levels depending on the degree of the speakers you've chosen. So here's what the CBDM board has on their website, and down below is the link to the cbdmonline.org that talks about the competency levels. And once again, we're trying to match what we're getting for continuing education to the competencies we feel that we need for our continued growth in the educational world as a certifying dietary manager. So just basically, when we talk about level 1, that's your entry-level knowledge. Level 2 is the participant has a foundation of basic concepts of the topic, and we talk about the desired outcomes, of how to take back and facilitate the knowledge you get. So that's probably where a lot of our things fall. We have 1, and then we have 2, and then 3 is, this is where the participant has thorough knowledge of the topic. And the outcome is to integrate the analysis and the application of the knowledge to work at a continuous quality improvement idea or best practice. So 3 would kind of lead you down the road of where we're at now with the QAPI, or your QA processes in your building. So these are the competency levels that you're now going to be seeing more of when we offer continuing education courses or books or anything in our marketplace that we're going to be offering. They're going to have a competency level assigned so that you can see and choose and challenge yourself with what we have for our competencies. So this is a new thing that I guess new. We've had it out since about last year, but it's one that needs to be shared. And so today, hopefully, you'll go there and take a look at what the CBDM has on their website to talk more about the continuing competency levels. So we talked about when with your time frame. So 8 weeks is what we'd like to see before the date of the event. And you can anticipate a 4 to 6 week time frame for processing from the date the application is received. So a lot of things that we ask of you to get sent to us, all that paperwork that we know things that are missing or that we would like a little bit more clarification on, get back to you and to go ahead and follow up and see if the information is provided and if it fits the criteria to apply it to that continuing ed credit. So here is the application form that is in the manual or the handbook, and very basic information to start out with. But once again, if you go to the manual and go to page 9, it's going to have the application. And it's very smart laid out. It comes towards the end of the handbook. That way you read everything you need to know ahead of time. So by the time you hit page 9, you're an expert in what you need, and then you're ready to start the application process. So when we look at this, pretty straightforward. We want the start date and the end date. So if it's a 1 or a 2 day or a 3 day, you're going to put the start date and then the end date in the range. If it's a 1 day program, the program start date and date will be the same. You can give it a title. Some of us work really hard to find a very nice, catchy title for our meeting. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It can just be simply called the Fall Chapter Meeting for Minnesota, for example. Then we have the topics there. So if you know some of the program topics, click one or more or all that apply. So you can click those boxes. That is kind of the areas that we look at in the handbook to deem what we see as qualified presenters or qualified topics. And then we go down to the location, very simple, city and state. And you got to go in and you need to take a look at your agenda and you need to do the math. And you need to tell us how many sanitation, food show, and general hours you're requesting, and then total it. And then that is what we go by when we review your documentation. So we also put in there, once again, we talked about those items that were ineligible, that it says do not count times for introductions, breaks, months, etc. Refer back into the handbook to see those items that are not eligible. And then we'd like to see the sanitation hours listed on the agenda. So when you do your agenda, I like to see agendas that have all the speakers have, so that you can find what the agenda, a sanitation, and if you're using a food show. So, and then keep in mind, food show hours are equivalent to the amount of time designated in the printed program brochure. And once again, keep in mind that you have 5 hours max, a 3-year cert period for the food show. And then we want you to give us a guesstimate or an estimate about how many attendees you're going to have. And once again, that's just a guesstimate. Now, the next 2 boxes, program chair and registration contact. This necessarily isn't the same person in your chapters, but the important thing to remember is that program chair is the contact person for us here at ANFP. They're the go-to for us when we have questions. The registration contact is the information for members or other people to get into. It might be the person registering the participant, and that you want that listed for marketing purposes. But once again, the program chair is the main person of contact. And also very important here is that you print carefully so that we can see and read a legible email address. This form, you can type it in, so you don't have to handwrite it. It can be pulled up on the computer. You can type in the boxes. But if you choose to hand fill it out, please make sure it's legible, because it's very important that we have a telephone number, an email address, and that we can read your name, since that is the contact that will be put into the system, and that is how we will go about finding you and contacting you if we had any information. And this person is also the one that's going to get the final email that tells the continuing education number, the CE number, approval number, and a breakdown of what we've approved for your CE. So then, how do we send this? Very simple. You've got the options down below of emailing it to the info@anfponline.org. You can also fax it. I know we do still fax in long-term care, as amazing as that seems. Or you can mail it snail mail, and it will go to the CBDM prior approval. If you're going to email it, and a good thing to remember is if you can put it into PDF documents, that is a nice way to get it into one file. Word documents are fine as well. But once again, the whole process can be very streamlined and done online. When you send off your application, there's what we call the corresponding documentation that needs to go along. So the printed program with agenda and outline, learning objectives for each session, the speaker bios, resume, or credentials, a sample of the program evaluation. How are you going to poll your members to see if they felt that the speakers did a nice job and they learned something? And then the sample certificate of completion. And once again, we like to see space for the CBDM approval number, so your CE prior approval number will go on there, and a spot where your CE hours earned can be listed. And then the program prior approval form and the program details. So we have a checkoff box there, so line up your documentation, check them off, and you're going to be sure that you have a complete application, and it should be able to zip through the process. Now, there's a second page, and the second page is the program details. This you can type in, or once again, if you print it and handwrite it, we have some questions that we'd like you to answer about the details of your program. And basically, what will the program accomplish? And what's considered a valuable educational experience? Why do you feel this is valuable to your members? And how will this program or chapter meeting help the attendees? And this is just based off of your thoughts as the person, the educator, or the program chair. This is just your thoughts on what your aim and your goal was when you were looking to set this agenda together. And once again, it has to be filled out by the program chair based off of your meeting goals, or if you've chosen a theme, how do these speakers relate to the theme? Okay, so jumping back. Also in the handbook is just a breakdown of just kind of what we talked about, each of those sections, what you need to do to fill them out and to get them filled out correctly. Here is a sample of qualified presenters. So when you are looking towards finding speakers, you can use the handbook and you can go back to page 6 and you can say, okay, if I wanted to find a speaker in the topic of, say, sanitation, if it's something with compliance with regulations, speakers that would be approved for this would be certified dietary managers, dietitians, sanitarians, ServSafe instructors. So that can be listed there as well. HACCP guidelines, I do want to put a push out there for, it's not just sanitation, it's also food safety. So right now with the life safety codes and disaster preparedness, that's sanitation CE. So that's something that's important to look at as well. That can be included, and that can be a way to add another sanitation continuing education credit to your upcoming meetings, as if you're going to take on the life safety codes or the disaster preparedness or emergency preparedness. So once again, that's on page 6. And then on page 7, down below Appendix B, is just kind of some of the acronyms that we use behind our names so that you can kind of tell what that person's career goal is. For example, a PHR, that was a new one for me. That lists out as a professional in human resources. LPNs, most of us know that's a licensed practical nurse. And then we have a CDE, the Certified Diabetes Educator. So once again, they're listed in Appendix B and will help you when you're looking for, or when you have maybe someone asking to speak at your meetings. You can kind of look at their initials and say, oh, I know what that acronym means. And yes, that would be a good topic to you. So once again, we have just in Appendix A a good breakdown of what's included in those topics. And that's for you guys to review and take a look at. So we talked a little bit about what to submit. The program agenda with the timeline, the evaluation, certificate attendance, the speaker bios, and I will tell you from experience, the speaker bios are usually the thing that take the longest to round up. So let's take a look at just some tips. So right now, let's talk about the agenda. We kind of want to say, you know, we want to get the course hour by hour. We want a good agenda laid out with the time frame. When you go and you answer your questions, keep in mind what do I want out of the speaker, and when I put it on the agenda, does it tell something about it? So this tip down here, boom, boom, bad example. So this agenda is very basic. It doesn't tell me anything. It tells me there's a meeting on November 13th. They're having a business meeting, their introduction of the speaker, speaker's presentation, then there's going to be a Q&A, and they're going to ask for 2 general continuing education credits. Tells me nothing. Doesn't tell me who's speaking. You know, what happens if one of those speakers is going to talk about disaster preparedness? It's not going to be a general CE. It's going to be a sanitation. So that type of agenda with the timeline is not good enough. That does not tell us. And that would get you a call back from the office here. So take a look at that example. So here's kind of like the agenda that's above and beyond. A lot of us go to other organizations' meetings that might be your healthcare leading aids or your American Healthcare Association, and they like to have colored boxes. They tell you if it's appropriate for CDMs, if it's appropriate for dietitians, social workers. So they have all sorts of icons, and that's really nice. That's laid out well. It talks about the general CEs. It talks about food show. So once again, That's very concise. It gives the title, like from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, hospitality and senior living. The gal is doing it has a Bachelor of Science, food service product consultant from Direct Supply. So that's an excellent. Does yours need to be that detailed? Probably not. But this is a nice way, and if you happen to have the opportunity to do it this way, or have someone marketing to lay it out, that's great. So then we take a look at down in the bottom corner. This is one that is an example of if you have a 2-day event and you want to make sure that on your agenda that you list out the total number for both days, but then that you also have the opportunity to split it out so the members know that on Thursday they would get 6 CEs, 3.5 general and 2.5 sanitation, or on Friday they would get 3.5 general, so they would get another 6, and then the way it's split out there. And in the upper corner here, let's see. Okay, upper corner there's just another way to put it out there. They have the speakers listed, they have the times, and then they have what kind of continuing education credit is given for that. So on your agendas, be as specific as you can. It's a way to market your program. It's usually, like for Iowa, we have it printed in our newsletter, so the more you can have filled out, the more you have the interest of the attendees to want to come. So make it exciting and get everything listed and be thorough. So now we get to the evaluations. Once again, make it simple. We have a couple options here. We want to make sure that the objectives and the educational methods coincide, that we feel that we've met those. So we want some way to evaluate. So here's a couple where you can have the speaker, excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor. You can also use a rating system where you can have a 5-point scale, you can have a 3-point scale, you can ask things if the program was effective in meeting all the objectives, if the material was interesting, and if the instructor was prepared and knowledgeable. And I always like to leave a little room on these sheets for comments, because this is where you can pick up those nuggets. Maybe someone has an idea for another speaker that triggered from one that they had just heard. So keep your program evaluations as a keeper when you're done. Go through those and see what the comments are. And a lot of speakers want to know, how did I do? And this is something you can tally and share with them. But it's important for us also to look when we're granting continuing ed credits, if that speaker, if the objectives they have, if at the end, did you get your bang for your buck as a chapter? Did they provide what the services that they offered up front? Certificates of attendance, and this is something I feel bad because in Iowa, I forgot to put the certificate seal on ours last time, so I will apologize. And yeah, I was on the phone. But once you get approved for your continuing education credits, ANFP sends you the approval email, and attached to it is the gold seal that says that it's CDEDM approved. So go ahead and include that on your certificate. And once again, your certificate of attendance should have the information on there. It should be, you're going to provide us the sample, but there should be room for the member's name and the amount of CEs that were awarded. If it's a 1-day or 2-day, you can break it out. Some of our chapters have actually added on the end a little caveat that talks about how to report, where to log on to, that they're required to track their own continuing education hours. And here it's listed, the 45 hours for the 3-year qualifying. You can even spell that even more and add the 9 sanitation requirements. And once again, the big thing, keep the certificate for your records. So you could add the self-reporting verbiage to your certificate, very simple. In Iowa, we like to do a front and back because they get a hard copy. And on the front is the agenda with everything spelled out for the meeting. And on the back side is certificate that has the prior approval number and all this information. So they have one document to take back with them to use for their self-reporting and their self-tracking. So this is a good way. But once again, be sure to put that gold seal of approval on your certificate of attendance. When we're looking at the speakers and the trainers, like I said earlier, that to me has always been the most frustrating part of being the program or working with speakers. And as an education committee, we reach out and we want the objectives from the speaker. We want, you know, a little overall descriptor of what they're going to speak about. And then we like to have their bio or their curriculum vitae. Do we need an RD's 15 pages of all her accomplishments? Probably not, but if she provides it, that's great. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and so some of these people say, well, I don't have one. Well, then you can say to them, well, think about it. Do you have something posted on your company's website? Is there a descriptor of you and what you do for that vendor? Or what is your LinkedIn profile? Does it tell information? That's areas that they can go. They can get the information with the sender. So once again, you need to make sure that you get the information from them in a timely fashion, and that is something that you're going to need for each and every speaker. So here's an example, and I know Sharon's on the call, but this was Iowa's last meeting, and when we do it, we have what she was going to talk about, the objectives, and then the little bio. And that's something that they provide for us. If it's a speaker we've had from the past, and you still have their bio on hand, some of us old dogs have been around for a while, so we might have our state dietitian in Iowa comes almost every year, so she provides us with her bio, and then we just ask if there's any changes from the last year, and if she says no, then we pretty much have the information. So that's also a good thing to have. Another one is you can have their pictures. If you're going to have a program, maybe you're having a 2 or 3 day event and you have a program for it, you can include the pictures of the speaker and their bio. So here's 3 forms. It can be, speaker bios can be lengthy, they can be short, but once again, we need to provide that information to ANFP so they can make sure that the topic that's being presented is worthy of the continuing ed credit. Okay, so now, then what? So wrapping it up.
Seriously, people.
After you get everything turned in,
Barb, can we stop for just a second, please?
Yes, we can.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we get quite a bit of background noise. People's phones are ringing. We can hear others talking. So if you're able to, please mute your phone to be sure that all of our callers can hear Barbara. Sorry, Barb. Go ahead.
All right, thanks. So when we're sitting here and getting ready to, you know, we're a couple weeks out from our meeting, we've sent the information to ANFP, watch your inbox for your email. If you're the program coordinator and you were the one listed to receive the information with the email, then you need to watch for it. It will come from ANFP. It will be called prior approval in the subject line. So just make sure it doesn't end up in Neverland or in the trash. And that is your official document that tells you your continuing education number. It lists what we would put in any of the marketing or list on the ANFP site, the site of the meeting, city and state, and if there's a title. And then it's going to spell out what we're approved for continuing education credit. And it's also going to include an attachment, which will be that certificate of attendance and that ANFP gold seal. So take that and put that on your certificate so that it's front and center so the members know that, yes, you did get your prior approval approved. Then you might want to be sure that you remind your members once that they've gotten their approval and their certificates that that's something that they need to keep. If they were to be audited for their continuing education credit. Once again, those speaker bios start early and keep after them. If that's something you're waiting You need to, if it's the emails aren't working, reach out on the phone and see what you can do, because you need to get that application in so that the process can start. And once again, I think it's important that as a chapter and your board members, they need to know about this process. In Iowa, we've always had it be the incoming president-elect that took care of the meeting, and that was right after, the day after they were put in office in October. They were already planning a 2-day meeting in the spring, which is a lot to ask. So have an education committee and get the board involved so that they all know and can all help out and get this process moving. Because it's very important that we get prior approved and in a timely fashion so that your members have the knowledge that, yes, this program does meet all the requirements and it will help capture those important 45 continuing ed credits. I included on this one how to maintain your credential. That is also found on the CBDM online, and that is just following through with now you have everything prior approved, you're having your chapter meeting. The next logical step for them is hang on to this information you attended. You're going to need this for proof, and it's going to go towards your tally. I like to tell people, do a spend down, do 45 hours in 3 years and have a document on your desktop where you can have a spend down. So 45 minus the 12 I just got in October and the categories, so you can kind of track to see where you're at, so you're not surprised when the end of your 3-year term rolls around and you're short a couple of continuing ed credits. And I think also spending some time at your chapter meetings. You should have time for chapter business or chapter board meeting, and it is nice to be able to show members how to get in and how to track their CEs and how to put that in. And one of the items that was talked about at the ANFP headquarters is the fact that you have to know when you go in to put your continuing education in that you need to use the prior approved course when reporting via the self-reporting. So if you choose the prior approved course, it will pull up the number and the program will already be listed. You're not going to have to type it all in. So we need to remind our members, look for the prior approved course under the self-reporting, and that's where you're going to put in the prior approval number. And even having something at the back of the room so your members can go back in and ask questions, have another board member back there that can walk them through the process. We do that quite often, and we do it on our smartphones. So now, time for some questions. Hopefully you have some. And then I wanted to remind everybody from Abigail, the next chapter chat is going to be already in December, right around the corner. And that one's going to be worth 1 general continuing education for What's Your Grit. And once again, stay tuned for that. So Abigail, let's go ahead and take some questions and see what if we can help you answer them.
Yes. So I've unmuted all the phones, or if you'd like to, if you're on the web portion of the program and you'd like to use the chat function to send us a question, please feel free to do that. But let's go ahead and open it up right now for those of you that have questions. There's no questions out there. Somehow I don't believe
yes.
that.
This is Leslie at Barrett Hospital in Dillon.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm sorry I didn't get on the very first of this. Can you tell me where to download or where to get that manual from? Or the book?
Abigail is going to, you can attach it as an attachment after the fact, but the prior approval handbook, let me back up and we'll get to that link, and it is on the site. You can go in and you can download it, or you can keep it electronic. All right, there we go. It's on the CBDM online for prior approval for chapters. So there's the link right there, and we can go ahead and get it to you attached as a PDF. Can we not, Abigail?
Yes, so Barb, I've got the screen now, you'll see, for those of you on the web portion. Once you're on ANFP Connect, you will have to sign in. So at the top, you would usually see a blue sign in button. That's the only way you can get access to the volunteer resources documents. So once you are signed in, you'll be on the ANFP Connect home and go to volunteer resources, go to meeting resources, and from here, the first section is the CE prior approval. So you see you have the handbook and application, which you simply click on, and it'll automatically download. And from there, you can complete it and save it on your computer.
Perfect. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. What other questions do we have out there? Barb, what are some of the things that you're seeing when you see applications come in? Kind of a common error, if you will, where our chapters could use some help or some additional pointers?
I think doing the math, calculating your continuing ed, some of the agendas get a little tricky where maybe we're having a 45-minute program instead of a 60. So if you have some odd times, since we do our continuing ed in 15-minute increments, make sure you're doing that math accurately. Because, you know, you can end up with a 12.75 or, you know, because of the 15 increments. Also, one of the things that I was surprised to see in the last couple months of me doing this is the sanitation, that we're not capturing emergency preparedness or disaster preparedness as a sanitation. And I think that's just because that's kind of a new thing for us too. So being able to turn that general CE into a sanitation is really big for some chapters, since we're going for that magic 9.
Yeah, I think that's important to bring up there, Barb. Is that, you know, an agenda with not as many sanitation hours as maybe we should. So, you know, I think getting some new ideas and topics out there that do qualify as sanitation hours, you know, the things that Barb has suggested here today, be sure you're thinking of those when you are putting together your prior approval application and your agendas. That maybe not the typical things that we think of sanitation, but that doesn't mean that they won't qualify. So certainly if you have questions, reach out to Barbara. But again, thinking outside of the box there for those sanitation hours will really help you as well as your chapter. What other kinds of questions do we have out there? I know that some of us, prior to Barbara coming on board, I had been reviewing or checking up on some of the prior application approvals as they come across my desk. And one thing I noticed that some of our chapters struggle with was writing objectives. So Barb, do you have any pointers for that piece of the application?
I think when we talk about writing the objectives, is don't get caught up if a speaker has, you know, if we're looking at a theme for our meeting, say the overall theme is sanitation, you know, take a look at what are the basics that we're trying to get for the objectives. What are we sharing and what do we want you to go away with? It's kind of like, what are the takeaways? If I were to step back and leave this presentation, what do I hope that people will go away with knowing? And 2 or 3 objectives is fine. You know, don't get hung up that I have to have 3. If you have 2 good objectives, that is great. And if you're looking for speakers and the speakers are like, well, give me a topic, well, try to give them one if you have a theme for how you want your meeting to be about, you know. And, you know, or take a look and, you know, front of the house sanitation is always huge. That's a topic that we know hand washing is involved in, and proper plate and utensil handling. So, you know, just take a look at what you want the members to learn and then make just one simple sentence objectives of what you learn. Don't make it fancy. Tell us what you're going to share and what they're going to go away with.
Great. Yes. And for those of you that don't know, we do have a how-to out on the ANFP Connect under Meeting Resources, how to write learning objectives. So it gives you some good pointers and a place to start, maybe for those that aren't as familiar with writing those and creating those. In addition, we have some other tools out there to help you through the CE prior approval process. Of course, the certificate of attendance sample and evaluation sample. For those of us that are not using SurveyMonkey, we do have paper evaluation sample available. And of course, I want to point out the program resource guide. This is an ANFP approved list of speakers that have spoken at our regional meetings or ACE meetings. So right there, you already have quality when you're vetting speakers through this list. And again, you simply click on the link once you're signed in to ANFP Connect, and the guide will appear, and it gives you their contact information, some of the topics that they've spoken on. So definitely worth going through that and reaching out to some of those people.
And then another thing is keep yourself organized. Being organized through this whole process will help. Get the handbook out, start the application and start looking at what are the supporting documents I need, and start gathering them and keeping it organized so that you're not losing a bio because you forgot where you saved that email, or just be organized and thorough so that you've got everything on a checklist so that you know these are the things, this is where I'm at, this is what I need, and then you're ready and you'll be better prepared to submit the application.
Great. What other questions do we have out there? Anyone? And don't forget you can use your chat function if you don't want to speak up on the phone. All right. Anything else, Barb, that you'd like to let our audience know?
It's been a great experience to be able to see what other chapters are doing for education. I came in at a great time right before a lot of chapters were doing their fall meetings. And I think sometimes it behooves us to go out and look at other chapters' websites and look at others' agendas so we can see. Maybe it's a speaker that, was across the state line. Maybe your neighbor chapter had someone and you can call them and say, hey, how was that speaker on disaster preparedness? And you can get your speakers that way or get some ideas and thoughts. And I will tell you that once we get the information and we market it, we put it out on the ANFP website. So you might automatically, if you have your dates posted early, you will have vendors that will reach out to you and volunteer to be speakers. That is just part of being a chapter. They can see the chapter officers, they can see who that education chair is. So be prepared to have some offers come from the outside world in emails and embrace them. If it's a topic of interest, see how it is. Have them send you samples or go to their website. That's also an awesome way to work with our ANFP vendor community that want to support us as well.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, certainly if you think of questions after our program today, reach out to Barbara directly, and she can be reached via email at priораpprovals@anfponline.org. Or if you have questions that you'd like me to relay to her, I believe most of everybody knows my email address by now, asalazzo@anfponline.org. Or if you think of questions next week that pop in your head, definitely let us know. I just want to thank Barbara. Thank you so much for being here with us today and giving us all this great information and the details. I do hope that most of all of our attendees found this really helpful. We will have a recording available on the YouTube channel within the next couple days. So for those that weren't able to join us, let your fellow members know that that's out there and it's available at any time. And then we certainly hope that you join us on Tuesday, December 5th at 2 o'clock Central Time for our next chapter chat. and that will be discussing grit. So be on the lookout for that. This is a little unique in that we are offering 1 hour of general CE for this chapter chat. So we'll be asking our chapter leaders to register, and we will be taking attendance to verify that. But we think it's going to be a great session, talking more about perseverance and how we're reaching our long-term goals and how we can accomplish those long-term goals. So again, thank you so much, Barbara, and everybody else. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.